This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs. Hi, I'm Gordon Raquel from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com or, of course, follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. Every week, we interview a film professional, discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by cinematographer Laura Valladao, whose work includes Dear Mama, Fremont, and Premature, just to name a few. Welcome to the show, Laura.
Thanks for having me.
I guess to start, can you give me a bit of background? Like, how did you get into film and become a cinematographer?
Sure. I'm not actually sure how I decided to go into film in general, but I did my undergrad in film, and I wasn't sure which direction I wanted to go in, if I wanted to be an editor or director, and I sort of tried a few different things. And I found myself really excited by lighting. So in my undergrad, I worked a lot in Griffin Electric. I worked as a gaffer. I worked in a G&E rental house after undergrad. And during that time, immediately after my undergrad, I sort of transitioned into wanting to shoot. And I went back to school. I did my MFA at NYU as a cinematographer, and I've been shooting exclusively since then.
So what was it about lighting that attracted you when you first sort of discovered it?
Initially, I was really interested in sort of the optics and physics and kind of science of light, as well as the sort of psychology element of light too. I was really interested in how the light in a space affects how we feel and how it affects how we behave and interact with each other in our day-to-day lives, and then also how that carries over to imagery and art and visuals.
I'm going to interrupt this interview for 1 second. We want to thank PixelView, one of our sponsors. They're a streaming solution for filmmakers. PixelView lets you stream your work to remote clients for easy collaboration, and it works with both on-set teams and post-production teams. With built-in video chat, you can discuss and make changes in real time and stream directly from your editing software. Or you can use the hardware encoder to stream from DaVinci Resolve or the camera on set. See the promo code and the link in the video description below. Okay, I gotta ask, how does lighting make us act and behave? Like, how does it influence our acting, or I guess not acting, but
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good question, and there are so many factors, but I know, like, as a cinematographer, if there isn't specific blocking laid out for a scene, if it's something that I know that we're going to work out with actors on the day, I know that if I set up a specific light coming through a window in a specific space, I can often sort of guide or influence the scene, to move toward the light or toward the window. And so, where the way that you add light to a space affects where people settle, and it affects like which direction, they want to look. Yeah, and just I think overall people's general comfort levels too.
interesting. So I guess the darker, I'm assuming darker means they're a little less comfortable because they can't see what's going
It
on.
totally depends. It depends on the scene, right? It depends on the scene and the actor, and there are definitely scenes when you'll have an actor that you can feel isn't really wanting to be in the light, which often is correct for the scene. And there's sort of things that you can do to guide that. And obviously, working with professional actors, you can give marks, you can give notes, and and they're finding their light and all of those things. But there's a lot that you can do as a cinematographer and working with your gaffer and the lighting team to sort of gently nudge things in that direction.
So what are the type of projects that excite you or attract you to them?
Most of my projects, the features that I'm excited about, the documentaries that I'm excited about that I've done up until this point have all been very different, aesthetically and from a process perspective and from a story and world perspective. And that's something I'm really excited about. I tend to like to jump into a new look or a new world or a new theme every time. So that's that's something that I'm looking for. If it's something I haven't done before, that's definitely attractive to me.
Now, when you first get a script, what is it, do you make notes in the margins? Like, how do you sort of tackle the script to figure out the look for the film?
Yeah, so the first time I read through the script, I try not to take any notes, and actually I try not to visualize the script too much. If something specific comes to mind, then obviously I'll make note of it. But the first time I read the script, I'm really just seeing, how does it make me feel? Am I connecting to the story? And is this something that I feel like, is there something that I feel like I can contribute personally and as a cinematographer to this story? Am I the right person to collaborate? And if the answer is yes, and I move forward, then there are a few other, I do obviously read the script many times. So usually then the second time I read it, I'll start to underline and make notes about specific moments that feel really engaging to me, specific moments where I had like a physical or like emotional reaction, or if there are images that start to come up, I'll make notes about it there. Usually at that point, I do like a deep dive for references. So I'll watch a lot of films, I'll look at photography, depending on what the film is, I'll do some research on like the world of the film, the time period of the film, the characters, and then when I go back to read the script the third time, I'll kind of have those materials and visuals and that sort of canon in mind. And I'll sort of start to try to make connections between those visuals and the visuals that I've imagined, and then the physical script.
So then, like, once you've got that package, I guess, together, or your like notes and everything, how do you work with the director to create the visual language for a film?
Yeah, so then the next step is I'll usually sit down with the director, and I love to do this is over the course of several conversations, and it's different with every director, which is also something that I really enjoy. Just like every project is different, the collaboration with each director is different, and I like trying to figure them out and sort of get to the bottom of when they're explaining to me how they want something to feel. The more I know about them and like their work, I can use that information to translate it into imagery and figure out which cinematography tools and visual storytelling tools we want to use. So usually it starts with a conversation with the director that's a little bit more general. Eventually we'll do a read through of the script, usually where we read through everything and we talk about if there are specific visuals or ideas for specific moments. I'll definitely make note of those. And then from there, we'll sort of brainstorm, what were we really, what are we really connecting to in some of the references, and what are we not connecting to? A lot of times in that reference and material building stage, it'll be hundreds and thousands of images and films, and it gets really big. And then for me, which is really fun, and the visual storytelling sort of starts when we start to whittle that down into specifics that match our script. And then we'll sort of talk about the patterns that we're noticing in the visual storytelling. And often what I do like to do with the director, and it's different with every director, sometimes this isn't a good fit, but I like to make sort of a dogma or like a manifesto that will go into our shoot with. It's sort of a list of these are the things that are important to us. These are sort of our like North Star guiding things that we want to remember and always come back to as things are fluctuating and we're making changes on the day.
Now, does that I guess like North Star, do you consider that like law, or are you flexible with that? Like, does it need to be flexible in a sense?
I think it depends on the director in the film. It's almost always flexible. I mean, I'm a big believer in a shot list, but I'm also a big believer in throwing away the shot list when it's not working, and just being really present and honest about what is compelling in the moment on the day. But I like to go in with a shot list, and I think like yeah, obviously, hopefully, you're going to discover things as you're making the film that are more honest and stronger than what you would imagine in pre-production. And it's important to be sort of open to embracing those things when they're right.
And do you like, because I think about like how important composition is to the look of the film as well. So do some cinematographers I've talked to like want to be also the camera person? Is that something similar for you, or do you work closely with the camera operators?
Yeah, I operated on this film. It's different for me depending on the project. I love to operate. So my like early background was in lighting, and then when I started shooting, I fell really into handheld operating, specifically in documentary verite operating. That was sort of my second love in my cinematography journey. Um, so operating is something that I like to do. I feel most connected to the performances when I'm operating. That being said, having an operator that you trust and that you can collaborate with, on an intimate level can be really powerful and really useful, especially if you're using multiple cameras or specialty operating, if you've got Steadicam or something like that. So I like to operate when it is beneficial to the piece, but also working with operators can be really good too.
So now you've mentioned documentary a couple times. So I'm wondering, like, what is something that you learned on documentary that you use in your fiction work, and vice versa? Is there something you learned in your fiction work that you use in your documentary?
Yeah, absolutely. So just like fiction work, documentaries come in all shapes and sizes and different directors and processes and everything. But specifically working in like verite style documentary work, one sort of epiphany that I had early on is that blocking and lighting are actually interconnected and in some ways the same thing, right? Whereas a narrative often will set the light and then we'll figure out the actors blocking and the cameras blocking so that we're landing so the light is hitting in the right place. But with documentary or working in more verite, the lighting is as it is. You don't have as much control over it. So you're moving the camera in order to change the lighting rather than moving the light. And both of those things work, and both of those things work in narrative as well. But that's definitely something that I sort of realized through my documentary work. And then as far as narrative, ways that narrative has informed my documentary work, I mean, constantly, there are so many visual storytelling tools in narrative that obviously in documentary, sometimes you have a little bit less control, but there's still a lot you can do as far as shooting with matching eye lines or deciding how tight or wide you want the eye lines to be to the lens. And just even like framing sizes. When in a verite documentary scene, you let your subject walk away from you and you have a wide shot versus when you follow them and have a tighter shot. Those are all visual storytelling decisions that you would make in a narrative space as well.
Now I have to ask, so I always think about Barbara Koppel's Harlan County, USA,
Mm-hmm.
and there's scenes where the DP, there might be like 20 people in the room, and yet it feels like we have four cameras, even though there's one camera. So when
Mm-hmm.
you're in a verite situation, like how do you set up or how do you prepare yourself so that you can create that feeling that there's multiple cameras, even though we only have one in a scene?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for doc work and verite work, I'm a big depends. It's different. Again, it's different for every story. I'm a big fan of shooting on a zoom lens, and that allows me to work efficiently and quickly while having a lot of different sizes, a lot of different compositions. I can move around and get a lot of shots. It's really cool to watch. I haven't seen the dailies for that film, but it's really cool if you can watch dailies from documentaries shot on film on like 16, usually older documentaries, because you can really see the operator, often the cinematographer, making decisions as far as what they roll on when they decided that they got the shot and then what they move on to for the next piece of the coverage. And you can really see them getting the wide shot and the close-up shot and kind of piecing together the edit really. in real time as it's going. And I think that we do a little bit less of that shooting digitally because we can kind of roll and roll forever. But the same thing really should apply where you're thinking about how the different pieces are going to be used.
Well, and I wonder, like, when you get into a room where there's like lots of people, do you research ahead of time? So it's like, I know who each person is so I can get a shot of them, or is that sort of like, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully. You know, obviously there's situations where you're just kind of thrown into something and you do the best to follow along what, you know, pay attention to what's happening in your frame, but also all the way around you throughout. Yeah, but as much as possible, you know, you want to know who the players in this space are, and you want to know if the story is being told sort of from a certain person's perspective. That's like a tool that exists in narrative but also is, you know, maybe underused, maybe not underused, but can definitely be used in documentary, just to heighten the storytelling, and thinking about that in the compositions that you're finding and which actions you're following.
So how the heck do you, so if, because you're doing verite, we're talking, you know, there's different types of docs, but if we're talking about verite, like, you might enter into a situation where you don't know what's going to happen. So how do you determine when you don't know what's going to happen, what to focus on?
I mean, you make decisions in the moment, and sometimes they're right and sometimes they're not right, you know, like sometimes you miss things. Obviously that's going to happen, but I think it's really paying attention to, like you said, like if you know who you want to be with and you know who the players are, you know, then really focusing on them, but also what they're responding to. And so it's not necessarily about, for me at least, in the way that I like to work in that setting, it's not necessarily about covering the action and getting all of the, you know, things. Sometimes that can be important, but it can also be just as important to really stay with the person who's experiencing or observing or reacting, and you can let those other things happen in the sound, as well. But it really depends.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of an unfair question, I guess you'd say, because who knows what's going to happen, right? It's just sort of a, but I've always
Yeah,
wondered, like, how do you figure that out in the moment?
yeah. Well, I mean, and that's, you know, handheld camera and a zoom lens is really great because you can get up and follow. You can, you know, if you're mobile, you can, um, you know, you can kind of be prepared for a lot of things. I've done some, I mean, doc work especially, but I've also done some narrative work where we've had improv scenes that start inside and end up, you know, outside following someone across the street and coming back, and all kinds of things. And I love working that way because it makes you just really, you can't really anticipate what's going to happen next. So you have to just really be focusing on what's happening moment to moment, which is how I think the most engaging cinematography, you know, is most effective anyway.
Now, is there a scene from your work that was really difficult to execute, but you're really pleased with the outcome?
Sure. You know, I'm trying to think about uh, Fremont specifically. Um, you know, yeah, you know, it's a simple scene, but in Fremont at the end, there's a scene with Donya when she goes into the mechanic shop, and it's a big handheld. We did end up shooting it as a oneer. There's also some coverage, and they've used the coverage, but we did shoot it as a oneer. And I love executing things like that, either handheld or sticks or dolly or Steadicam or whatever. That's always really fun. It's always really satisfying when sort of all the pieces come together and you get it in one take or one shot, multiple takes.
And how do you, like, for a oneer, like, how do you, you know, figure out, I get, because there's so many moving parts. There's like, there's going to be actors moving, there's going to be set pieces moving, things like that. So how much practice goes into getting that oneer?
It depends on the scene. I shot a short film a while ago that's maybe 12 minutes long, and the whole short film is it's all one handheld take. And that was the idea from the beginning. And I think we did a whole day of rehearsals, and then we did either a day or like a day and a half of takes, where I think we did like eight actual takes. And what's so interesting, I mean, and it's a 12-minute short film, so that could be a scene from a feature too, you know, depending on how you want to look at it. But what's so cool about, you know, these long one single take scenes or films is that usually you get a handful of them that work, that are executed correctly, but they all have slight differences that make them feel really different from each other, just as far as pacing or compositions, or, you know, just really subtle things. And I'm always really interested in that.
Now, I have one last question for you. What would you say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
Great question. Okay, guilty pleasure films. I have two that I go back to always, that like made me want to make movies, and they are The Matrix, the first one, and 10 Things I Hate About You.
Oh, fantastic choices. Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you today.
Yeah, of course, it was fun. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's it for this week, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com, or of course follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching. This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs.